Welcome. I'm Robert Love, Chairman of UNIRANKS. Today's session is on the Connected Campus. I also have a co-panelist with me today. Her name is Kris Lensmeyer. That's going to be guiding us through some different questions as we continue to talk about the Connected Campus. Kris, can you share a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure, thanks. I'm Kris Lensmeyer. I'm the chair of the Missouri Colleges Fund. It's a fund that raises money and resources for the independent colleges and universities in the state of Missouri. Such an important time because higher education needs support more than ever right now. And I've also worked in higher education in a number of different ways. And so this topic is of utmost importance for me, as well as the colleges that we serve, and I think higher education in general. So thank you for talking about this. I think that we'd start today by having you give kind of an overview of your thoughts of what a connected campus is and what's important to a connected campus.
Right. Well, I'd like to start off with the way I look at a campus. It really starts at the hierarchy of, it's more than just technology, is how technology is going to benefit the different streams of information or the different streams of events that affect the students, the faculty, and staff. So if we think about those, we've got the environmental type of things that relate to the facilities. You know, what do the buildings look like? What do the grounds look like? As the students go through and take classes, what does that feel like? Is it hot? Is it warm? But just as well, what does the virtual experience look like? I think the virtual is turning out to really be a key role as we look at the future of education, definitely higher education, with the onset of COVID and, possibility of other type of COVID type diseases that may hit society. To go along with that, I think the other key really important thing is how do we help the mental stability or the mental access to these students and faculty and staff to where they're at their optimum performance level so they can get the most out of their education. And then last but not least is how does social fit into this? I want to talk a little bit more as we get into the session, just how we can leverage and how important social is today and what the key differences are, Kris, than what they were, just 6 months, 18 months, and even, 5 years ago.
Yeah, you're so right. It's amazing how the colleges and universities have changed and had to pivot the last few years. But I think a lot of these things are things that were coming, and that COVID has just accelerated some of that, especially in the technology and the connectivity that we're talking about. So how do you think higher education stands compared to other industries when it comes to talking about technology and connectivity?
Well, that's a great question. My observation and experience in the key industry is healthcare. As you look at healthcare compared to all the elements that they're measuring and they're trying to grasp as the patient care theater happens once they enter, an emergency room or just daily and monthly and regular visits to their healthcare provider. I think they have so many other touch points that higher education is not leveraging at this time. So some of those key things is being able to tie some of the disparate pieces of information that we already know about the student into key areas of auxiliary services, whether it be food service, whether it be, student services and the way that they plan their activities and different things that happen on the day parts and even during the weekend of a campus, whether it be in person, virtual, or a combination thereof.
Yeah, I think that the experience is so important, especially in, anywhere, whether it's healthcare or retail or higher education. But I know that higher education, it's their lifeblood, whether it's online or virtual, as you mentioned earlier, or it's on campus, it makes such a difference. And I know you talked about kind of this personalization and getting data and utilizing data in a way, collecting data and utilizing data in a way that really impacts and allows for the colleges and universities to be much more impactful for the students. So can you talk a little bit more about your thoughts on that and some of the things that you think are coming up in the future from that?
Right. Well, I think as we look at that, we need to take a close look at the student information systems. And the student information system, that's typically where the information about the student starts at with their college and higher education experience, if you will. So that contains their grades, their academic schedules, and of course, their payment status. But what it doesn't do, since it has that rich information, is pull together some of the things from auxiliary services such as food service. And so a good example of this is that typical food service vendor, and again, let me qualify this, if they don't have this, they should be, will have some kind of kitchen technology system that allows them to create menus, and that should be really set up and designed based upon the student demographic. I think a lot of times what ends up happening, if you will, is that student demographic is observed after the menu is created. So there's no way for the person or the teams that are responsible for that to understand any kind of demographic information about the customer before they hit the door. Or for, when I say hit the door, I mean enter the food service venue to enjoy the food that the team has worked hard to prepare. I think the next step for that is to be able to write and get conduitive solutions that will actually talk to both and bring them together in a meaningful way. So in other words, if the manager, the chef, if you will, starts to make the menu and they're looking at a certain day part or day, they need to understand what demographic is going to be in person, on campus, and for that particular day part. If you take it even a step further, let's say that that student or a group of students is involved in sports or athletics, is that if we know and we can talk to that schedule at the same time to know when a particular demographic, a student is going to be in the food service venue, let's say football, soccer, if you will, basketball, just to name a few, we know when they're going to conclude their practice for the day. We know when they're going to hit or come into the dining venue. So we're hyper prepared for that food and even a custom menu, if you will. That's just a small sample of what I'm talking about as we need to regroup here and look at the system that the food service venues are using, along with the student information system and even the athletics system, and that whole scheduling of academics and practices and even games for that matter, and bring them all together in a way that people can access that information and use it.
Well, and that's all information that we have within higher education, that we're collecting as soon as they come in. And I know from a standpoint of getting somebody, a student, interested in the enrollment process to being a student to the alumni, kind of the whole life cycle of a student is important. So we've also talked about that experience and being able to know where people are on campus and when they're in certain areas to utilize it. And we've even talked about lighting and how lighting can impact the experience on that. So can you tell us a little bit more about how we could do that or the impact of what that could have on the campus experience?
Great. Thank you, Kris. I think it really rolls up to a phrase that I've kind of put together, and that's just-in-time sensory network. Mm-hmm. So sensory network, let me see if I can describe it a little bit more. A sensor could be, a utilization center, meaning it's a sensor that knows someone is in a particular area. It's a sensor to know what the temperature is. It's a sensor to know what it is outside, what it is inside of a particular area, but as well as what time of day it is. So if we look at that holistically and we think more outside the box and think about the circadian rhythms that our bodies go through to do the biological processes that it's, was kind of built to do. I think that's the key to make sure that we're not just forcing an environment on a student, is that we either do a couple of things. Number one, we pre-design it, but we allow them to design it themselves to customize what that would look like. So what am I really talking about? So if we take the temperature, a lot of our facilities today already have temperature monitoring. We know that the facilities department, if you will, that's oversees that, can actually monitor it, adjust it based upon resources that's available, the temperature outside, so forth and so on. But the one thing that we haven't been able to really look at yet, and I talked about it a little bit earlier, touched upon it, was the circadian rhythms. And that really comes down to the different light and the different light spectrums. So we know for a fact and studies that, it's human nature with the different light spectrums that will perform differently. So if you're in a dark environment all the time, you're going to have a different reaction to stimuli, the different, even your biological processes. So what I'd like to entertain and really put out there, and these technologies are already out there, by the way, is that as we build new facilities, that we put in lighting that does a couple of things. Number one, that it will adapt itself to the time of day and produce different spectrums of light to really keep the optimum learning happening for the students, as well as the optimum productivity for the faculty and staff that are doing different services across campus. The other one that is really critical, I think, that really is, in my opinion, has been untouched definitely for higher education, and that's being able to sanitize these different rooms with different spectrums that are not harmful with human beings. Those solutions are out there today. So as we replace these different lighting solutions that are out there, I would challenge us all to think about, and you can reach out to me and I can provide these different types of solutions that I've studied, and there's been studies done on that. As you replace the new buildings or even lighting, it may be something that you might want to look at that'll be something that's really marketable as you start to talk about your students that are still on campus, but as well as future students are going to come on a campus. How we can take something that you've never thought about, turning it into a marketable thing that really is going to help that student get the most out of their learning experience, but something as simple as the lighting. Now, of course, there's all other kinds of things when we talk about facilities, whether it's, lawnmowers, here in the US, depending on the locale that you're at, there may be something that needs to be groundskeeping to where that can be automated. That's actually pretty easy. And I think to go along with that, what I'm really guiding us into is the thought process, because we're all experiencing it today. And that's a more transient workforce, a more transient faculty and staff, meaning that the folks and people that were responsible for the student outcomes their tenure has really been reduced to probably just a few years versus 10, maybe 20 years is what we've seen in the past. Well, when those folks leave, they have that knowledge. Typically, it's not been recorded in a fashion that can be passed on. So I think with this automation, by putting it in place to where we've got the sensory, and you mentioned even artificial intelligence models that we can apply to that to help these newer employees that may not know all these nuances of the campus, I think that's key. And I think that's where I'd like to see us go.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's interesting when you talk about facilities is also some of the automation that can track things that are being done. Like for instance, you go into airports now and it will tell you outside the door on the restrooms, because everybody's getting off the plane and needing to that, how many stalls are available or where the next stall is. And so there's some interesting things in that kind of way that could be implemented within higher education as well.
That's correct. That's correct. I think, the other thing that I would say to that, you're talking about, again, just in time, sensory network that's going to let people know real time what's going on in a different particular area of the campus that they're starting to go into or want to learn more about. So what I mean by learn more about. So let's say that it's a particular location or venue that you know as a student may be very crowded. You know yourself, you're not feeling very well today, or you know based upon the most recent information that there may be some different things happening on campus that you need to maybe stay or away from, or don't be exposed. That's probably a better way to do it. So with these different types of sensory networks today, we can actually provide portals or information, from, just the university app in itself to let the student know how many people are in a particular area and or how long they've been there. And so they can make an educated decision based upon their class schedule too, whether or not they have time to wait for a particular service or activity before they have to hit their next class.
So how does, as we talk about this connected campus, how can you explain some of the efficiencies that could be in place to help higher education and the administration of higher education make decisions and that kind of thing?
Right. So one of the key things is satisfaction. Today, there are surveys that are taking, or there's just, what I call brute force information that's given to you unsolicited by just the students that want you to know about different things that they want you to know about. But what if we could put the network out there that you could actually just tell by the sentiment of a facial experience, whether or not that is something that we need to pay attention to. So for example, they come into the registrar's office, you can picking up a facial experience that they're confused or maybe not happy. So then that can be shared immediately, or it could be flagged that potentially that we need to pay a little bit more attention to this particular interaction that's happening with this student or even faculty and staff member. Now, that's not to say that we want to spy, if you will. It's a harsh term, but I think again, if we can provide these agnostic type of tools that are really just aggregating, basic information without identifying the person, I think that's the key. But I think we still have to be very careful because it's very easily, can be construed and by the student or by the faculty and staff that in fact we are monitoring them specifically. We don't want that to happen. This is all about how can we improve real time that experience for that student or that faculty and staff member.
Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful information on that. The other thing I know you and I have talked a lot about when it comes to college campuses is safety, and how there are things that can be done to ensure safety as well as the privacy, as you just talked about, of information for people. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I think today, there needs to be more ways that we can creatively look at different people of interest that are coming on campus that the system or the campus has never seen before. Now, granted, we all have policies and procedures that what you're supposed to do when you come on a particular campus, but what happens when it's 12 o'clock at night and someone is on campus that, the public safety folks and teams can't be everywhere at all at once. So I think that's where the sensors come in place to help us understand those type of things, meaning it's 12 o'clock at night and someone is walking on a remote sidewalk that that typically doesn't have a lot of traffic, or conversely, we know it's someone that's triggered themselves that they want to be monitored as they walk back to their dorm because it's late at night. So I think those are the type of things that we can put in place that are very easily done. I think all these things can be done with just the technology that typically each student has on their person, whether it be their cell phone, whether it be their iPad or some type of mobile technology. as long as it's allowed and the student will know that it's not going to be abused, I think that's the key.
And I know that even in dining services, looking at those students like that late night meals and how do we provide those, and utilizing technology, maybe it's mobile order delivery or utilizing technology in other ways to ensure that food is available to students at midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning when there may not be people around. So there's lots of interesting ways to look at that.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'd like to have you consider too, Kris, is that, you know, since we've had COVID and you know, since the students have come back onto campus, I think what we've seen is that they're coming together in smaller groups, but they're doing it in remote locations. So I think what's cool about that is that they're not coming back and into these larger congested areas.
Okay, sorry about that. We had a little technical issue on our side, but we are back. So Bob, we were talking about kind of a customized experience or personalized experience versus a forced experience, and how this connected campus can really assist in that personalized, customized experience that students today really expect.
Well, this is one of my favorite topics, and you know, it's one of my big visions for the future. And I think that's why UNIRANKS is such a big part of this, because they're really interested in, you know, how can we look at multiple factors, if you will, of measuring those multiple factors of the student experience. So let me see if I can dive into this just a little bit more. In the past, in a lot of universities, is that there are key areas that the students always go to for for different functions, whether it be athletics, whether it be for food service, whether it be for even classrooms, right? For different things that the typically a large population of students for different classes versus smaller classes. I think what my observations have been, and I think this is what we need to be hypersensitive to, and that's why, if you will, if I could take a pause and reflect on what we've already talked about, this just-in-time sensory network. If we have that in place, to where we have motion sensors, we have different door sensors, we have all these different things that can contribute, and they can be put together, and we let artificial intelligence models be smart about learning and do some machine learning to give us that information just in time, to where we're not having to digest it and make actions ourselves, but we've got a system that's going to be smart about it. I think that's key. So what I have found and you know, with my observation, is that the students are actually congregating in smaller areas, and they may be a little bit remote. So instead of all coming to the same food service venue, if you will, they're actually finding different places outside once they picked up their food, and they're actually doing that. Or it's in a different lobby of a different building that they're coming together and even eating their lunch or doing studies. They're not coming together all at one place. And I think that's key. I think they've learned that they want to be safe, but yet they want to have social interaction. And then I think this is really going to help them. So again, if we backtrack a little bit, and then we are able to look at what it looks like as far as these heat map areas, right, of the different buildings, and we put the technology in place to make it easy for our academic and facilities and operational people on these campuses to understand what that is, as they look at bringing new buildings on, or more importantly, as they schedule different classes for the next physical year or next academic year or semester for that matter, they can be sensitive to that and look back and actually replay that information. If they move this population, a certain population, over to another building, what would that heat map look like? That's possible today. So again, if we can look at this just-in-time sensory network, I think that's the key for me. and be able to make it to where it's agnostic, where it's anonymous, if you will, to a certain degree, but still be able to tie a certain factor of information together, but it doesn't tie it to a name. Today, your cell phones actually do that. They know what cell phone, different cell phones are. What if we could tie the different cell phone to a higher level of different demographic, but you would never know who that person is? Now, the only difference is that typically that we want to do, going back to mental and actually just well-being of a student, is that if we find a student that's not, participating in certain activities, then we could use these systems to be a smart advisor or smart alert to where we can check on the well-being of a particular student. Again, it goes back to facial recognition, if you will. I don't want to call it facial recognition. It's really looking at the sentiment of what the face is giving us. Does that student look healthy? More importantly, we've got temperature sensors. I know some of the universities out there actually have temperature sensors that can actually read the temperature of a person as they go through different different points of the campus. So if we look at all that, combine it together, we can alert our nursing teams that are on campus to as far as the well-being of a particular student, to maybe make sure they're getting the right nourishment, the right medical attention, so forth and so on. That also goes to something I saw the other day, is that a true life example where the facilities can look at where handicapped or a disability person may have challenges for a particular type of area in a building. Do they have the way to be mobile and be able to get where they need to be? So what I was getting ready to say is that there's an example where an elevator was down for like 3 days, and a particular student was living on, I think, the 4th floor of a particular dormitory, and they couldn't get out. So this is key information that we should, if it was done right, would be shared across all the major constituents or stakeholders for the well-being of that student, as well as her participation in classes, so forth and so on.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that you're talking about really impact retention. And as we know, recruitment and retention are the lifeblood of our colleges and universities. We want to make sure that our students are taken care of, that they're having the kind of experience, that they're connected in a connected campus. Because if they're not connecting to campus, and what you're talking about can really put some red flags up there, or identify some individuals or groups of individuals that maybe aren't connecting, that could then be proactive to making sure that experience is positive. Students, they are like to have flexibility in their schedule. They are used to having things that they want and when they want them, and they're used to the customization and personalization. And I agree with you, as we talked earlier, that higher education isn't necessarily on the cutting edge of this, and they could be in a lot of ways, because they are collecting a lot of the information, and a lot of the information that you've talked about can really make an impact on a campus, I believe.
Well, Kris, it's spot on. I think if I could take it as a step further for us, what I'm trying to communicate is not only do we, as the faculty and staff and administrators of the universities, have a better understanding what their students, their customers are doing, if you will, but I think we need to make sure that technology can assist with letting the customer define what their experience is going to be, versus, like you said before, a forced experience, meaning this is the way it typically works, this is the way we're going to do it, and we're going to try to get, take care of 80% of the people that want to do it this way, and then that 20%, well, I guess they'll just have to adapt. I think those times are over. We have to find ways for the key areas that are important for each and every student, that they have some way to control what that experience is going to be. And I think, again, if we look at all the connected technology that we have today that's available, we just have to find a way to deploy it. I think we're definitely going to be on the right track to making sure that we can make sure those students are engaged, they're healthy, and they're getting the most out of their college and educational experience to prepare them for the future. So again, education, they're having to spend more money today for education than they ever have been before. So we need to find ways so they feel good and they do get the highest value and perform at optimum level so they can take into education as it comes to them from our great professors and faculty and staff and their experiences, so they can be great, take that information and leverage it to the greatness that we know we want them to achieve, not just for today, but in the future. And then for the future, what I see happening too, just to kind of bring it back into a close circle, Kris, is that, you know, if we find a way that it's not invasive to use some way to identify that human being, whether it be facial, I've used that several times today, but I really think there might be some other things in the long-term future that will allow us to understand who that person is that comes back on campus or starts to participate into maybe an activity, that we can know when that person is on campus, or we know when they're on virtually observing, and we can let them know we still think about them, because we're very dependent upon these folks. And as word of mouth, when I say word of mouth, to continue to talk about their college experience and how positive it was, so it encouraged other students that are coming up through the other grade schools and even the high school, if you will, to get ready for college and university life, how well and how great that experience was. And this all contributes and can contribute to the UNIRANKS system. And that's why it's been built, that it's not just looking at a couple different factors that the experts are taking a look at, but it's an open ranking system to where everybody can contribute to it and what it means to be special for them for their college experience.
Yeah, that's so important. So what did we forget to talk about? Is there anything else that you have that I think we've covered a lot of great topics, and hopefully the audience has gleaned some wonderful information from us, but I just want to make sure there wasn't anything else we were forgetting to talk about.
Right. So, you know, I didn't get into specific technologies. We can do that later on, or you can contact me and we can walk you through some of those things. I think a lot of it has to be is that we need to look forward. So as you're planning and looking at new systems, whether it be student information systems or your food service provider or whatever, we have to find either something that's going to connect those all together where they're not disparate pieces of or silos of information, is that they all are able to talk collaboratively together to where we can create an experience that really excels and enables that student to excel themselves into higher education and for the future for themselves.
Yeah, I agree. I know in one of the positions I was in higher education, different databases and different connections or sources of information that did not talk, and it actually created more work for the people that were working there when they're not connected. And so that is really important with all of the systems that they're looking at as well. So thank you for inviting me to participate with you today. This has been enlightening and some great information, and we hope that the audience enjoyed this and got some information as well.
You bet. And thank you, Kris, for being here with me today. I'm so excited about what higher education is going to mean for our children today, and more importantly for the future. And again, I'm so excited and so honored to be the chairman of UNIRANKS and this whole conference, because I think this is just the start of the future, that I'm so happy that we've got an open system that everybody around the world can contribute to help each other make that student experience even better than it is today.
I agree.
Well, thanks everyone for being here. And thanks again, Kris, for being my sidekick, if you will, to help us talk about some of these things that are very important to me. And we wish you continued great experience with the conference. Have a great day.